Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kenna, and today we're going to be talking with Garrett Harregger. He is an owner of Harregger Farms in Hart, Michigan, where they produce fruit. Garrett, do you want to go ahead and get us started by telling a little bit about the history of your farm?
I can. Thanks, Kenna. Yeah, as Kenna mentioned, my name is Garrett Harreggers. I am fourth generation with my brother, and I are fourth generation owners of Harreggers Farms. My great grandpa started the farm in 1911, when he emigrated from the Netherlands with his family, and my grandfather took over the farm from him after World War II, and um, he had the farm until the early to mid 80s when my dad and uncle took over, and we're transitioning to my brother is a full-time manager at this time of the farm, and he runs the day-to-day, and I also farm or work off the farm doing an off-farm employment job, where I'm a consultant for Wilbur Ellis Company, where I also work with other farmers. But nevertheless, the history of my farm has typically been fruit production. We had livestock for 100 years ultimately, as well. We still have some of the original, or at least one of the original trees that my great grandfather planted on the farm, for nostalgia, more or less, but has been around for a long time. It's started out with apples and pears and peaches and some tart cherries later on, and the livestock was around, like I say, for 100 years, and we've had row crops alongside of that. It was basically a subsistence farm. My great grandfather had it, and my grandpa as well. And my dad and my uncle really grew the farm from 80s and 90s and really into the early 2000s. And my brother and I have continued that path. We've kind of switched our cropping mixes up a bit and really focus on tree fruit production, especially apples and tart cherries. And we also specialize in asparagus on the vegetable end, and where we outsource most of our open farmland for local row crop growers to have crop rotation for our farm. We have eliminated our livestock operation as well, just to choose to focus on our other ventures, and do some custom application for other farms as well too. So we got a lot going on, as many farms do in our area. We are very diverse, and obviously look for other opportunities to diversify, depending on situation too. So it's ultimately how I got where I'm at in the history of our farm, I suppose.
Yeah, that was great. So you mentioned a little bit about how you started into asparagus along with your fruit. I know that this is for a fruit production interview, but do you want to talk a little bit about why you made that decision to grow asparagus along with your fruit?
hmm so ultimately, fruit production it's a full season crop. I mean, if we're dealing with tart cherries or apples, we start taking care of that crop. Well, it's a 12-month out of the year crop, but we don't harvest until the fall historically for apples, and midsummer for tart cherries. Um, those crops are different from like a number two yellow corn that you would see driving down the road, where that corn is planted in May or June and harvested in October, November, and ultimately paid on delivery, whether that be next spring or when you decide to deliver it, or that fall out of the field, you could get paid. The tart cherry and apple thing typically is a lagged payment, and it tightens cash flow up oftentimes. So asparagus is a natural fit for us for early cash flow in our season, but also it helped open up give something for our labor to do. We employ seasonal migrant labor, and it gave our crews a crop to harvest for 6 or 8 weeks in the spring, where it was historically a slower time of the year for us with other fruit production. Usually pruning is wrapped up by then. We were able to move them into asparagus harvest. And at the time, when we started in the asparagus thing, we also had some peaches as well. So we'd move into hand thinning peaches, and then moved right into picking some cherries and picking peaches, and then you're picking apples. So it really helps spread our labor out as well. So it's helped to diversify and keep the asparagus in our mix, and has been an overall good addition to our crop mix.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Um, I'm gonna go into a little bit more specifics. Do you want to talk about your acreage a little bit?
Well, I can't say everything. That's like asking how much money somebody has in the bank, kind of. but no, we've typically farm between 300 and 330 acres of asparagus, probably about 300 acres of tart cherries, and farm about 80 to 100 acres of apples. Yeah, and again, we have other crops in rotation that we lease, that we ground that we own, but we rent out for row crop production just for crop rotation. It physically or fiscally didn't make sense for us to own a lot of the equipment needed to be large scale row crop growers, so we chose to outsource that ultimately, and that. But typically, yeah, we're farming overall, like I say, probably 700 to 900 acres depending on the year. And we do some custom farming for some other farms as well. So it's probably between 700 and 900 acres depending on the year.
Okay. Kind of going off of that, and this is probably just because I'm not really sure, but how does that compare to like farm size or other farms? What kind of farm would you fall under?
Yeah, it's hard to gauge, honestly, that as farms get fewer and far between, they also get larger. And I would say we're on the upper tier of the asparagus size. Tart cherry is probably upper average, I would say, for the area. And apples probably average for the area. Still not large by any means, but it's a portion of our business anyway. So I would say overall, for the area, above average size farm, but it also has to feed multiple families that are living and working off of the farm. So we have to make sure that we scale it enough and have enough acres to cover. Hence, ultimately, why I'm not back on the farm full time myself, just because at the time when I started working full time out of college, it was smaller yet and not able to probably consume one more income taken away from that farm as well. So yeah, I would say average to above average.
Perfect. Thanks. So now that we've talked about some personal information about your farm, I'm going to go for some personal
Yeah,
information on you. Do you want to talk
perfect.
about your pathway to where you are now? I know you've mentioned a couple different times about a job away from the farm. Do you want to talk about that?
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll back it right up to, I mean, ultimately my high school. Growing up, high school, college, I really had no intention on doing anything besides farming. That's all I knew. That's all I wanted to do. I did very well in high school and really just wanted to go back home and farm. And my parents kind of said, no, you're not going to do that. You are going to get an education. And then if you choose to want to come back, you're more than welcome to. So I did. I went to Michigan State for 4 years studying agribusiness management. I specialized in food industry management and also crop and soil sciences um, as well. So I had a little bit of everything. I took a lot of horticulture classes as well. I didn't minor. There wasn't a big tree fruit hort area to study at that time. I took relevant courses to what I wanted to do. I was in the honors college when I was at MSU too, so it enabled me to do different um, coursework and take a few different flexible options that allowed me to do what I wanted to do. And ultimately, at the time, I still wanted to come home and farm full time. There was zero question. I went through college, worked my way through college, working as a teaching assistant for multiple courses um, throughout 3 to 4 years. Also worked at the crop and soil science, the agronomy farm for 4 years. So I was down there as well, and then worked all 4 summers throughout college at our farm in the summertime. So I worked a lot, again, intending fully to come back to the farm. Never did a off-farm internship or internship of any kind for that matter. And it enabled me to come home and work. I worked for probably a month when I graduated, when I moved back home. And the way things work out, I had a few friends working at Wilbur Ellis Company in Hart, which is basically a full service agricultural input supplier, ag retailer, one would say, where they sell chemicals and fertilizers, seeds, etc., to local farmers. And they had an individual quit out of the blue for a technical sales representative position on a Sunday. And I had some friends that were a couple years younger than me that were working for the company as interns, and reached out to me and said, you should apply for this. This would be perfect for you. You'd be really good at it. Like, at least talk to them about it. So again, at this time, I really didn't have intention, and just the way things work out, I made that connection. Talked to the manager. We ended up, it was the busiest time of the year for farming. I mean, it was right around end of May. I mean, a lot of stuff going on, and ended up having a impromptu interview at a McDonald's in Muskegon with the regional manager, and they basically offered me that job the next day, and wanted me to start ASAP. I mean, they just needed somebody at that point more than anything. And so I started the Tuesday after Memorial Day. I think it was my birthday and Memorial Day, and I started the next day. So it was just how things, it's funny how things work out, I guess, that way. But I've been there for I think this is 10 or 11 seasons now. And it's, like I say, I've learned a lot. It's this, I struggle. It's the busiest time at both jobs, both my farm and both my consulting role are busy at the same exact times of the year, because we're dealing with the same problem. So I consult with other farmers on issues they may have, and help them solve problems to grow a better crop, make them more profitable. So I ultimately, I'm in the business to sell fertilizers, chemicals, seeds, all of that, but we do so to make a difference and improve crop health, crop quality, marketable yield, anything to help increase the bottom line for those farmers. So it's rewarding. I enjoy what I'm doing. I've always been a problem solver. I like um, being presented with these facts and being able to come up with a solution to either remediate an issue or get ahead of an issue that may be facing this grower. And it's very rewarding to make that connection for that individual and save them a lot of money or make them a lot of money, no matter how you look at it at some situations. But it helps me sleep at night knowing that I'm doing a good job for somebody, and I'm making a safer, better food supply, I guess, for the world too, because we're being environmentally conscious on what we're trying to do. And kind of went from there. I out when I started that job, then I didn't have a lot of credibility. I didn't have, other than I worked on a farm. Obviously, I farmed. I knew kind of that side of it, but it was kind of drinking from a fire hose. Didn't have any experience in that industry, that side of the industry, because I, again, never did any internships, never did any outside type employments related to the ag retail side. So I had a lot of learning to do, a lot of catch up to do, but I've always been pretty good at soaking information up very quickly, and that's what it took. But I was handed a set of keys on that Tuesday, and my boss wrote a few names of people and phone numbers, said, "Here, go talk to these people." And that's how it started. I kind of got thrown into it really quickly, but that's sometimes how you learn best. But it's enabled me to make a lot of connections with growers, even in the area that I did not know. We're always kind of stuck in our little bubbles as farmers, that
Mhm.
we don't get out of our little bubble, or our little community, more or less. Sometimes that's communities just a few square miles that you're stuck in, seems like all the time. But it's enabled me to have a lot of connections and forge some relationships I would have never made with some of these individuals, and really helped my personal life on a lot of that front as well. So it's been a rewarding career so far. It is enjoyable at the end of the day for both of them. It's very taxing through most times of the year to kind of operate in two full-time jobs. There's no question, but again, I think that it would be a good something to somebody to look into in school, check that out. Um, any of There's a lot of opportunity in ag retail. There's a lot of opportunity in the input supplier manufacturer roles above and beyond that as well. So there's a lot of opportunities in ag. I think what I'm trying to say is people don't see per se on the front end of this thing. So getting out there and get boots on the ground and kind of understanding there's different it's not just a pitchfork and overalls type approach to this thing is definitely what I encourage some of these students that would be listening.
Yeah, thanks. That was like some bonus information for this interview. So I'm pulling like 3 different careers out of this
Yeah, there you
plant
go.
science category. So that was great. Um, I am gonna steer it back a little bit, back to
Go
the
ahead.
production side of things. Wondering if maybe you could just run through a brief example of some of the other kinds of things you do in this career. It might be easiest to pick a crop and kind of walk through its growing life.
Yep. Ultimately, the fruit production stuff is they're perennial crops, right? So it's not like we're planting corn it's an annual crop where we're planting every year. A tree fruit is a long-term investment. So we're making that plan usually years in advance of what we are going to plant, or remediate some orchards and remove and start over with new production systems and kind of planning in advance. So deciding what varieties, what rootstocks, what the intention for those orchards are years in advance. So that's kind of a pre-planning. As we get into the spring month or the winter time, we're pruning trees that have already been planted, to try maximizing production and yield and quality for the following year and years, and tree training, I guess. As we get into the spring, I mean, usually in April, mid-April, we receive trees in that we would have ordered, and would plant said trees in these orchards where we would go out and kind of use a plow of sorts to kind of put them in the ground more or less and cover them up. I mean, let them go and do a little pruning on them and get those things growing. So and if it's an apple orchard, we're doing some trellis work where we're putting them up on wires and trying to train them to grow quicker and grow smaller trees where they're more labor efficient, but also more high quality fruit that we can grow as well. So that gives us, depending on the year, if we do a lot of planting, that is a very intensive process for an apple production orchard establishment. So it does get quite busy at that timing just to get some tree training and whatnot done. As we move into mid to late April after planting, or sometimes during the same, a lot of this stuff all flows together. But for example, we'll be starting preventative sprays for like apple scab pathogen, where you're basically fighting a pathogen for about 2 months in the spring to ensure that we do not have a apple scab fungus on any apples that are sold, which usually turn out to be a cull. So we're ultimately we're spraying insecticides, fungicides throughout the orchard for the summertime months, to try prevent some of those issues. Watching trap counts, so we monitor insect trap counts where we look at models to decide and discuss that when should be optimal timing to apply insecticides that would most effective on those insects. So we're doing that pretty much through the summer. I mean, we do a lot of orchard upkeep then. I mean, you're talking mowing, you're talking more training. Again, it's all about training on a lot of this stuff, but weed spray and stuff like that, keeping the weeds under control to keep the trees growing. But we get to the fall and or in the apple side, I'm saying we move into production there. So we're bringing in, again, we have migrant laborers that come in and harvest and haul that crop away ultimately when they get it harvested. So it's kind of full gamut, and really all the time you're not doing those physical tasks, you're marketing your crop planning for the following years. And I say years because ultimately to order a tree and get what you want, typically it's a 3-year wait
Mm.
to get exactly what you want, unless you get lucky ultimately and somebody has some inventory. But historically that's a multi-year approach to looking out and anticipating really what's going to be the next big thing to plant. And it's very difficult from a marketing standpoint and to look ahead in the future and decide that this is going to be a premium apple that we should be planting, or this is a lower demand apple we should not be planting, or this apple could be used for processing for applesauce or juice, or fresh packed in sold in stores in a case. So a lot of different factors that go into the planning. And ultimately, as we move forward in a lot of management roles, it becomes more planning. It becomes more spending time in front of a computer to make a lot of those type of decisions and a lot of research. And it takes a lot of research from the industry wide as well. And we are involved in a lot of industry type research and also different grower organizations to network. So it's a lot of honestly networking. So it's like if you were in college or high school and you have your extracurriculars, it's no different in the ag world either. I mean, we all have our industry groups that would function similar. I mean, your FFAs, your student councils, your National Honor Society, stuff like that, but they serve an ag function too. So we spend a lot of time doing that stuff because we believe there's value there as well, not only in networking, but also in kind of advancing the industry as well. And we kind of want to make our mark doing what we do as well. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, it's definitely transformed from what it used to be when everybody's out there pulling sprayers with a horse and had big handguns and 40-foot ladders up in apple trees. And now there's platforms, self-propelled platforms being used to train and tie and harvest. And there are robotic assisted harvesters and robotic harvesters not far away, just trying to get costs down for some of those things. So it is changing from what we do every year, and it's becoming more complicated. We do food safety audits too, is another big portion of it too. So we're always staying on top of food safety and making sure that we are selling safe food, where we follow generally accepted management practices for those growing the crops that we are growing to ensure that we are following generally accepted standards for these buyers of this produce too. So we look ahead and make sure that we are mitigating any risks from foodborne illness side, but also any production practices that we have. So people wearing gloves when they're harvesting, people using sanitary facilities, and any packing facility could be very sanitary. It's all gamut, making sure your water is safe, that you would be using as any rinse water. There's a whole gamut of that alone that is not a full-time job, but it has added a whole another level of management as well. So
Yeah.
it's not very cut and dried, I guess. I guess I could ramble on for a long time about each crop, but it's kind of an apple season in a nutshell, I suppose, in summary.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to the next question. You're
Yep.
kind of touching on this a little bit with that networking aspect. But what are some common issues within this career that you think might be beneficial for community members to know or your surrounding area to know?
Common issues that we face, truthfully, are labor availability. Is probably the biggest thing that the community should understand, that that we struggle with as we are growing crops that require, at this point in time, human management, human labor to harvest, to plant, to train. I mean, it's very labor intensive. Unfortunately, we struggle mightily find any local or migrant labor to get crops harvested, to get crops planted, and managed throughout the summer. So we do employ H2A workers through a labor contractor to get most of our crops harvested, to be honest. And it's has transformed how we do things, and costs have definitely increased exponentially in the last 10 years as a labor cost front. And it is very frustrating from the farm side that the margins get smaller and we are forced to do more with less, I guess, every year. And it
Mm-hmm.
people see farmers driving around in a nice truck or a nice tractor or whatever it may be, but they have to understand a lot of this, that we have to be more efficient in what we do. And this thing's changing so much that ultimately, and I don't have as much time as my grandfather did to do extracurricular things. I can't spend my time working on old equipment, old trucks. I have to have things that work when I need to, because we're running on such slim margins to do what we're doing, that it's very high asset management type business. But again, it's a lot tied to increased costs. And truthfully, we are getting less per pound of tart cherries, for example, than they did in the 1970s, and that's actually the same variety of cherries. It's the same rootstock, the same everything that they did in 1970s. We're using the same harvest technology, the same everything. It's just costs have increased that exponentially that we have to run more acres with less to
Mhm.
make less money, to be honest, than what they did even back in the 70s. So some of those things obviously are we look at from a cost standpoint, and we analyze those things whether they're worth in the long term. And again, we figured in our crop mix and that it is worth it at this point. But definitely, I think the community should understand that farming is a very, very slim margin business that we are operating under. They may go to the store and see $5 a pound asparagus or $4 a pound, whatever that may be, but understand that the farmer is getting a very slim portion of that typically, unless they're selling direct to some of these places. And even then, the markup is quite large for a lot of this fresh produce as well that you're buying. So the fact of the matter is we're always trying to do more with less to grow a safer food for the consumer. So we're doing more with less every year, and I don't know what's wrong with our heads sometimes, but we keep doing it for some reason, and it's just in our blood, and that's what we keep doing, and we hope we can continue.
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of pride is always there, especially in a multi-generational farm.
Correct.
So I think that is pretty much set to wrap up. I'm just gonna ask one more little question.
Yep.
And it's just if you were to offer a piece of advice to someone who was looking to get into this career, this position, whether it be your fruit production position or your position at Wilbur Ellis, what would that piece
Mhm.
of advice be?
Oh, get involved. And I say get involved, and that's a pretty broad topic. I feel like it gets thrown around a lot in the high school or the college. I mean, go do this, go do that. But truthfully, get involved, working, job shadowing, interning. Um, I'm always looking for people to help. I like hiring younger people that want to learn, that want to know more, that are eager. I mean, have an open mind with some things you're doing, and try improving no matter what you're doing, and kind of make your mark. I mean, I think it's very easy to get in an industry such as ag and kind of get stuck in a rut, but realize that um, there's constant change in ag, and it's not always for the better, but most of the time we are pushing in that direction. And understand, I think you got to think outside the box. And if you're not in this industry and going into the industry, that you can make a change for the better, because a lot of these farms are stuck in their ways on a lot of what they do, and they could use a new mind at the table there in those conversations to help improve their operation. So I think knowing what your career path is one thing, but I think ultimately you need to ask the question and get on some of these farms and kind of understand the whole supply chain a little bit more, because ultimately it doesn't matter what it is, it's logistics. Farming is logistics. My job at Wilbur Ellis is logistics. No matter how you look at it, we're moving product from point A to point B. There's just a lot of different things that happen in between.
Hmm.
So there's a place for a lot of different individuals that and again, with it being more specialized than it ever has been, some of these farms are getting large enough that they are able to hire full-time consultants like me just to operate on their farm. They have, some of them have their own trucking companies, some of them have their own grain facilities, their own packing facilities. I mean, the possibilities are endless for a lot of these farms. So I guess when I say get involved, understand that I'm saying get involved in some part of the supply chain and get your feet wet. I mean, you're going to find that the industry is very small. Ultimately, I've got a lot of friends that I went to college with, that I went to high school with, some students that I went to high school with that had zero desire to be anywhere near agriculture in high school, and have now somehow, some way ended up back in this mold. But it wouldn't be a cookie cutter farmer approach. They may be brokering produce, they may be packing asparagus, they may be running a fruit packing facility. There's several different things that you wouldn't think about as they were going through high school, but it's a very small industry, and I think you'll find that it is rewarding, and it's a very close knit community that we're working with. So get involved, meet some new people. I think that networking in the ag community definitely pays off and would definitely be worth their investment of time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great advice. Definitely that hands-on experience and networking opportunities are a great start to get into a position like this. Well, I think that is all I have for you today, Garrett. So thank you so much for your time and for your knowledge, and good luck with your growing season.
Thank you very much.